My name is Kelly Smith. I'm a product manager here at Oracle, and today I'm going to be talking about some reporting aspects that are available with the Recovery Appliance. Okay, so let's just talk about the Recovery Appliance itself. Has a bunch of reports built into the BI framework. And these reports allow the Recovery Appliance administrator to provide information to other users. So if you have DBAs who are protecting databases to the Recovery Appliance, there's functionality that allows you to send reports to those users, as well as do some administrative monitoring on the Recovery Appliance. So we're going to go through both aspects. I'm going to start in PowerPoint, and then we're going to switch over to a Recovery Appliance and do some reporting live, so you can see what the reports look like. So some of the reports that are available are active incidents reports. So you'll know if there are active incidents on the Recovery Appliance that need attention, what categories those incidents fall in. There's an API history report. So if you have some auditing requirements, need to know, what kind of operations are occurring on the Recovery Appliance. It gives you a full report that you can do some filtering on, and I'll show some of that. There's a protected database details report. This is kind of a report that is valuable to maybe a DBA or line of business person who is interested in how often their database is protected, and can just answer a lot of questions that typical people have about their database. When was the last backup? When was it sent to tape? Was it replicated to another site? It gives you a lot of rich information. Also give you some valuable information about how much space that database is using for backup. And I'll go into the details of that. Recovery window summary gives you some idea for all the databases that are protected, and if any of them are falling outside of the recovery window. I'll show some examples of that. And of course, top 10 databases shows the top 10 databases that are coming into the Recovery Appliance based on volume. And I'll show some details around that. And then finally, some organizations do chargeback to their departments and users. So we've got these chargeback reports where you can adjust and show the amount of space that's being used and apply a monetary value to that. Okay, so the BI reports themselves. So all these reports that I just talked about are available to have for output into different formats. You can send it in a PDF, a rich text format, Excel, or PowerPoint. And that allows you to schedule these reports to run on a regular basis and maybe send it to a DBA or to someone who's doing higher level monitoring of the backup and restore functionality. So all this can be scheduled. So everything that I show you today, of course, can be scheduled and then sent automatically, posted somewhere, sent through email. There's a lot of different options in the BI framework, and I'll go through some of those once we get into the live presentation. All right, so active incidents first. So this gives the operations team a view into all the active incidents that are occurring on the Recovery Appliance. Shows the database name, the severity, the incident details, and you can do filtering around that. So you can do filtering by the database itself. So, and I'll show this once we're live. This is just a PowerPoint presentation that kind of gives you an overview. But you can filter by database name, by severity, and by component category. So I'll go through that as well. This is the API call history, so it gives you a view of all the APIs that have been issued against the Recovery Appliance. You can see them by date. You can see them in a chart, so you get a good idea of what's happening on the Recovery Appliance. And you'll see that in our live view. Also, I want to point out that down here at the bottom, this API history, depending on what version of the BI framework you're leveraging, you may need to download this, and this is the link down at the bottom that will allow you to download this actual report and install it into your framework. It also has some of the requirements about the version of Enterprise Manager that you need to be running, so that's very useful. There again, there's filtering, so you can filter by all different types of categories. And again, we'll cover that once we get into the live reporting. So if you wanted to know a particular date and all the incidents that happened on a particular date, you can simply click on the date in the chart at the bottom, or the table at the bottom, and that date will be filtered. You can also filter by a particular database or particular activity. In this particular case, we're filtering by the AddDB API, and you can see all the ad databases that have occurred on different days. And then it gives you at the bottom the actual API calls that occurred. So you can see add database and the database name and the policy that it was associated with. Next is protected database. Again, this is very valuable for the DBA or the line of business that is leveraging this database. It gives you a lot of interesting information for the database itself. A lot of customers have to deal with the GDPR compliance reporting, and this makes it really easy, right? You can see the recovery window goal. You can see exactly how many recovery window days you have. You can see when the last backup was completed. You can see when the copy went to tape, and the replication, if you have replication set up to go to another recovery appliance. So it gives you a lot of valuable information. And again, I'll go through this in the live view. Recovery window summary. So this is a quick way to identify any databases that are falling out of compliance with their recovery window goals. In this particular view, all the databases are matching. I have a live version that has some databases that are falling outside, and we can look at that. Top 10 databases. As I mentioned before, these are the databases that are transferring the most data in and out of the recovery appliance. You can see data transfer, backup data transfer, replication data transfer, and tape transfer. And we'll go into the details of those as we go into the live version. There are two different versions of Chargeback Report. Because there are different ways that people charge for utilization of the recovery appliance. There's one model we call the grader model. And in this particular case, the customer would be charging, or I'm sorry, the recovery appliance administrator would be charging the user or the person or the database being protected for the entire space up front. So think of this as a model where the DBA comes to you and says, I need 100 terabytes of space. You reserve that 100 terabytes of space, and they pay for that entire 100 terabytes of space because you've reserved it just for them. The leased model is more of a pay-as-you-go model. So the DBA comes to you, says, I've got this database that needs protected, and you're only charging them for the space utilized on the recovery appliance. So it's just a two different approaches to charging for space utilization. One is charging for the entire space that you've reserved for them up front. The other is only charging them for the space utilization as it occurs. And we'll look at that. And the report itself is very clear on what data is being used. So you have a good idea of what model you want to use. And the setup for this is pretty easy. So you pick your recovery appliance, you pick your protection policy, you select the database, the protected database, and then you apply charges based on how much you want to charge for the recovery appliance utilization and for the tape utilization. And we split those in half because typically tape versus the recovery appliance, they have different charges per gigabyte, obviously, because the cost for actually managing those systems is different. And these are fully adjustable. I'll show you that in the live demo. Okay, so this is the chargeback report that charges for the entire reserved space. It gives an example here, but this is the type of data you'll see. And again, you'll see this in the live demo once I switch over in just a few moments. This is the least, so this is the pay-as-you-go model. Again, there's an explanation at the top that talks about the scenario and talks about which attributes we are using to do the calculation. This is what the space utilization looks like, so the customer or the person that's being charged can get a full report that shows the monthly usage. And again, we are showing in this particular case, in this particular report, the actual number that's being used for the chargeback. So you can see in this particular case that the space used for chargeback, and then you get your cost basis around that. Okay, so now let's switch over to log. Okay, so obviously my session has expired, so I need to connect back up. Okay, let me go through all of these so they will refresh behind the scenes and we don't have to wait for this every time. Quickly go through these. Okay, so earlier I talked about the recovery window summary. So this is a report, it's running against this Recovery Appliance Florence. This is a Recovery Appliance that's in our test center. I will point out that these are test servers, so there are a few things, there are a lot of people working on these. Hopefully nothing interesting will happen while we're doing the demonstration. But in this particular case, you can see that 93, almost 94% of the databases fall into their recovery window goal, but there are a few outliers. So let's scroll down. It shows all the databases that are meeting their recovery window goal. And now we want to get down to the bottom and look at these these databases that are falling outside of their protection window. And then you can quickly see that this database IBM 12E8K has an unprotected data window threshold of 5 minutes. It is currently at 9 minutes, 53 seconds. So that's why it showed up in this report. It's falling outside of its protection goal, and that immediately puts it in this report so that it's easy to see. This database is only about 4 minutes off, probably undergoing some maintenance or something like that, but it just gives you an idea that this database is having a particular problem. The second database in the list obviously hasn't been protected in 91 days. Obviously, like I mentioned, this is a test bed, so their database is coming in and out all the time. But this would be a situation where you either want to determine what's going on with that database. Is it a database that doesn't need to be protected anymore? Obviously, it hasn't been backed up in 91 days. So maybe something to go look at, but gives you a good understanding of databases that are just barely outside their window or way outside their window, and maybe the DBA needs to be contacted. Maybe the database doesn't exist any longer, or they're not backing it up. Okay, going over to the next report. This is the Protected Database Details report. This is the report that I mentioned earlier, where this is a good report to send to the DBA, right? They want to know what their protection status looks like. So in this particular case, it has the protected database name. It has the recovery appliance information where that database is being protected to. So this is the recovery appliance that's protecting the database. Tells you the size of the database, the version of the database, the nodes that are running the database, tells you the policy. It tells you how much reserve space you have for the database. In this particular case, the recovery window goal for the database. And remember, we had that threshold earlier. That database fell outside the threshold. This is what sets off the alarm, right? This particular threshold tells the recovery appliance that if this particular database has not been protected in the last 5 minutes, that it needs to set up a warning. So you'll see the warning in the dashboard. You'll also see the warning in the report, like we saw earlier. This is the amount of space that is being used to protect this database. So this is actually the space that is being utilized on the recovery appliance. So when I talked about the chargeback report earlier, if you were doing the least model, this would be the space that they would actually be charged for, because this is actual utilization. This is actually the reserve space. So if you were using the greater model, this is the space that this user would be charged for, this 124 terabytes versus the 105. They've got a 15-day protection window for this database. The database is currently being protected for 25 days. So this is a setting that you can adjust in the Recovery Appliance. The Recovery Appliance will save data essentially until it gets under space pressure unless you tell it to do otherwise. Because with this particular Recovery Appliance, there's extra space, so it's not being stringent about how many days that it's keeping for this database. This particular database has sent about a terabyte of data to the Recovery Appliance in the last 24 hours. Remember that the Recovery Appliance follows an incremental forever backup paradigm. So even though the database itself is 37.5 terabytes, the database has only sent about a terabyte of data to the Recovery Appliance. The other interesting thing, the Recovery Appliance does real-time redo protection, which means that the database is always protected. So in this particular case, the alarm for this database is set for 5 minutes. The real-time redo is enabled, so it's actually being protected at sub-second level. So in this particular case, you can see the unprotected data window is less than 1 second. One other piece of information, there's your dedupe ratio. So you're getting about 11.95 to 1, so almost 12 to 1 on this particular database. This database is not going to tape, so you'll see that the last copy, there was no copy to tape, but it is being replicated. So the replication occurred today. That means that there's another Recovery Appliance as this database is being sent to downstream on a regular basis. There are charts that follow all this, so you can see your protection by the day. So this is the last 7 days of protection for this particular database. This is the last rate over the last 24 hours. Let me switch to a different database just so I can show you what tape looks like real quick. So let's go to this Recovery Appliance. Let's look at this database. Right here it is. Let's look at this database. And I'll show this database in a moment as well when we look at the Chargeback Report, because this database is going to tape. So this database is not being replicated. So you've got all the same information. This database is being kept for 90 days. It's currently at 91. It has real-time redo enabled because it's less than 1 second. It's not being replicated. You can see that here, no replication, but it is going to tape. So the last tape backup occurred yesterday. It transferred about 2.5 terabytes to tape, and you can see this on a daily basis. So in this particular case, I just know how the database is set up. The database is doing a full once a week and doing daily incrementals. So you can see the full right here, and then there are daily incrementals, which are really small going to tape. So the typical paradigm, out to tape, fulls once a week, daily incrementals, you can see it right here in the report. And this is the data rate over the last 24 hours. So these are just the regular incrementals that are occurring on a daily basis in the last 24 hours. So that's your daily incremental right here. Okay, let's move on to the next. Okay, so here's the Chargeback Report. So again, we're looking at the same database that we were just looking at in the last view that is going to tape. And in this particular case, we are looking at the reserve space because this is the higher report. So this is the reserve space for the database. We've got the data that is coming into the Recovery Appliance by the month. So this database is showing, since December of the data that's coming in. These are all the monthly views and how much data is coming in for each month. This is the chargeback amount. You can see in this next chart the fluctuation in the charge. So obviously at the beginning, there's obviously a large charge into the Recovery Appliance because there's a steep incline in the charge because you go from 0 to full charge. Then as the Recovery Appliance balances out, you just see these small incremental changes in the amount of data that's being stored on the Recovery Appliance based on the incremental forever paradigm. And you can see that this database is slowly growing in size over the last 8 months. It breaks it down by yearly. So this is 2017, this is 2018, and then this is the cost per year. It shows you the daily utilization. So you can see this database has been growing over the last few months, or a few days actually. This is the last few days. So it's been growing over the last few days. And this is the tape out. So this is copy to tape, the monthly chargeback. You can see this tape utilization and growth in tape utilization. Shows you how much data is going out to tape, and then shows you the charge per tape, and then yearly per tape. So we separated tape and storage utilization on the Recovery Appliance purely because tape and disk have different cost factors. So let's look at, remember I said you select your Recovery Appliance, you select your protection policy, you select your database, that gives you this output. This output can be sent to the output can be sent through HTML, PDF, RTF, rich text format, Excel, and PowerPoint. You can also schedule it. And during the scheduling, you can specify a user that would go to. So you could specify like an email address, for example. And the person who is supposed to get that would get that, an email that contains this actual report. You can also adjust the cost basis. So we're at 5 cents. You can change it to 10 cents, 20 cents, whatever number. The Moss note that I pointed out earlier about chargeback actually contains instructions on how to change these particular drop-down values. So you see that. I'll move the window over just a little bit so we can see tape. The tape cost basis, same thing, 1 cent, 2 cent, 5 cent, and you can adjust these, and that will adjust all the numbers in the report. So it's very flexible based on how you want to charge your customers, and then provides that report directly to the customer. So you can set this up on a recurring schedule. If you want to charge them once a month, you could send them the chargeback report once a month, and it would automatically go to them. Next up, top 10 protected databases. So this gives you all the databases that are currently being protected by this particular Recovery Appliance. This is the top 10. Shows the last 24 hours of backup data, the last 7 days of backup data. Shows the amount of replication data in the last 24 hours and 7 days, and then the copy to tape in the last 24 hours and 7 days. Florence doesn't have tape, but let's go look at Vienna. This takes a moment to run. So while this is running, I'm going to switch over and we'll look at this next report, which is active incidents. So we'll come back to this top 10 so we can look at Vienna and see the tape out. You can see what that looks like. Okay, so active incidents. So these are all the incidents that are currently open on the Recovery Appliance. So you can see everything that's occurred. This is by component breakdown. So these are the different API components, cross checks, index backups, etc. These are the active incidents by the database. So these are all the database names and the incidents that are associated with them. You can click on a database and it will refilter. I'll do that in just a moment. And this is a chart of everything that's happening. So all the warnings that have occurred. So let's just go look at this database. So this particular database has a purge warning. And you can see that we filtered by this particular database. So now you've only got one warning down in the bottom that is associated with that database. So it gives you the flexibility of filtering and looking at the different incidents that belong to particular databases. Because you may have a particular database that's more of a problem than other databases. So it allows you to filter and look at those different databases. Okay, let's take a quick look at the API history. So these are all the calls that have come in to the Recovery Appliance from an API perspective. You can see this particular database. You can see, let's look at add database, because that's pretty interesting to see. Oh, there are no add databases. Let me refresh this, because there were. Just to make sure. Okay. Look at add database. So we filter by that. You can see all the different days, all the different add database operations. So on the December 17th, 2017, you can see there were 17 databases added. It gives you all those particular databases down here at the bottom, the name of the database, the protection policy for the database, and the reserve space for the database. So you can filter by any of these particular categories. You can also filter by day. So if we click on this, we get all the days back, and then we can click on the day, and we can see add DB and grant DB were the two particular API calls that came in for that particular day. So it gives you flexibility if you want to look at different ways to sort. Do you want to look at a particular database? What happened to that database? Do you want to look at a particular operation? And what happened to that operation? Let's go back to the top 10 real quick. Okay, so for the top 10, yeah. So this is copy to tape, so you can see tape operations that are occurring on this particular recovery appliance on a regular basis. So these are the tape operations that have occurred over the last 7 days because this particular recovery appliance has been sending data out to tape.